got their stuff. Hello, everyone. Awesome. Let me look at my script. All right. Awesome. Well, first, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Some of you braved the elements to get here. We appreciate that. You all on Zoom, thank you so much for joining us. So hello everyone and welcome to the District 4 Aldermanic Debate presented by the Associated Students of Madison, BadgersVote, and the Campus Area Neighborhood Association. My name is Eli Sarowski from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, and I will be the timekeeper and in-person facilitator.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lane Bodemiller, and I'm one of the co-lead interns with BadgersVote. We are your hub for voting on campus.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Nels. I'm your Associated Students of Madison vote coordinator, so I handle all of the civic engagement, coordination, and participation opportunities for the student government across campus.
Awesome. So I would like to remind you that this forum will be both available in person and via Zoom. So that's recorded forum will be made available on the Cano website and YouTube channel. If you have any questions to ask our candidates, you can ask during the audience participation portion of the segment, or if you prefer not to ask them in front of the crowd, you can submit a question through the QR code on the Google form, as well as through the quick Q&A function on Zoom. So joining us tonight are candidates Maxwell Lobenstein and Alder incumbent Mike Revere. Samantha Givich has unfortunately dropped out of District 4 Alderway, so she opted not to join us today. A quick disclaimer before we begin is all these campaigns have agreed to the rules of the forum beforehand. Your hosts have collaborated to create the format of this event. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question and will be granted the chance to respond if they are mentioned in another candidate's response. The questions have been chosen by Associated Students of Madison, BadgersVote, and the Campus Area Neighborhood Association. Finally, if you have any questions about voting or about getting involved with the Associated Students of Madison, BadgersVote, or the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, please come and visit us at the moderator's table or message us through the chat function on Zoom, and we are happy to help you out. So the first portion of this,
People are saying we can't hear you on Zoom, so maybe just a little bit louder, or maybe use a mic.
Can you, let me just make sure.
Yeah, that one's on.
This is on.
If you look down.
Right here. Yes, yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Is it in? Can you hear me over Zoom, people?
Zoom, is that better?
Better back there. Awesome. Can you guys hear me on Zoom? Okay, awesome. Let me just reread that so you all can hear what I said. And then you're just looking at someone saying stuff. So again, my name is Eli Sarowski from the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, and I will be the timekeeper and in-person facilitator today.
My name is Lane Bodemiller. I'm here with BadgersVote. BadgersVote is your hub for voting on campus.
My name is Sarah Nels. I'm here with the Associated Students of Madison. I am the vote coordinator, so I handle all of the civic participation and engagement opportunities through the student government on campus.
So I would like to remind you all that this forum is both in person and via Zoom, and that a recorded version of this forum will be made available on the Cano website and YouTube channel. If you have a question to ask our candidates, you can ask during the audience participation segment, or if you prefer, you can ask tonight, not in front of the cloud, you can ask over Zoom through the Q&A function or via our QR code Google form anonymously. So joining us tonight are candidates Maxwell Lobenstein and Alder incumbent Mike Revere. Samantha Givich has unfortunately dropped out of the D4 Alderways unofficially and opted to not join us tonight. So a quick disclaimer before we begin. All of these campaigns have agreed to the rules of this forum beforehand. Your hosts have collaborated to create the format of this event. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question and will be granted the chance to respond if they're mentioned in another candidate's response. The questions have been chosen by the Associated Students of Madison, BadgersVote, and the Campus Area Neighborhood Association. Finally, if you have any questions about voting or getting involved with the Associated Students of Madison, Badger Vote or the Campus Area Neighborhood Association, please come and visit us at the moderator's table, you all in person. Or if you're over Zoom, feel free to send us a chat at the end or during the whole forum, and we'd be happy to connect with you and help you out. So beginning today, we will start with opening statements from our candidates. First, we'll have an opening statement from Mike Revere, and then we'll have a statement from Maxwell Lobenstein. Then after that, we'll have 30 minutes for 5 topical questions that were thematic through our submission form. And then after that, we'll have additional questions and then closing statements from the candidates. So to start us off, we have an opening statement from Mike Revere.
Thank you very much, Eli. Good evening, everybody. I really appreciate the fact that so many of you are interested in hearing us speak this evening, whether you're with us in person or virtually. I certainly want to extend my gratitude absolutely to the organizers of today's debate and allowing us the opportunity to have our positions heard throughout the community. So a special sense of gratitude, of course, to ASM, BadgersVote, and the Campus Area Neighborhood Association. I have had the honor and privilege of representing much of the downtown area on the Madison City Council now for many, many, many years. I honestly never thought I would be representing the downtown for as long as I have. It's pretty remarkable, but I have to be honest with all of you. The public service and the fact that this position is just so rewarding is what's compelled me to seek re-election time and time again, including, of course, this year. I believe that I have a proven track record of being able to get things done. I absolutely have unfinished business that I wish to work on. I can mention a couple of those items now at the top of the conversation this evening. For example, a couple of years ago, I led the efforts to decriminalize the possession of cannabis, of marijuana, in our community. We were successful at doing that, and I promised at the time I would then work on the next step, which is expungement of those convictions predating when the ordinance was repealed. We're in the home stretch of getting that done through good work with others in City Hall and Municipal Court and the City Attorney's Office. And so that's one example. Another example that I hope many of you have heard of is the Lake Monona waterfront project. Most of the 4th District borders on Lake Monona to the south, due south. And I have long worked on efforts to increase accessibility to Lake Monona, just as on this end of the isthmus, there's wonderful opportunities to access Lake Mendota to the public, namely, of course, the beautiful Union Terrace. We don't have such opportunities on Lake Monona, especially connecting to downtown. Well, we're working hard on that. It's something that I've worked hard on for the last several years, particularly in the area of funding. We're really getting to finalizing a master plan and a design that we hope to implement as early as 2025 in the first phase. So those are a couple of examples of the unfinished business. I also want to just explain one reason why I think I've been driven and had the energy to seek this position again and for doing the work as long as I have. And that is because the 4th Aldermanic District is just so beautifully and richly diverse. I literally, on the same day, I can be helping an undergraduate UW student and helping an older adult, a senior citizen that lives in one of the couple of senior housing projects in the 4th District. It's very diverse in that way. So whether you're a student or a senior citizen or everybody in between, I've always worked hard to represent you. And especially in the area of students, since we are here on campus, I have to admit that I got my start in student government in many respects, like many of you in this room tonight. And I continue that forward to this day. I've been on the city council as a UW student. I've been on the city council, obviously, as a non-UW student. And whether I'm a student or non-student, have that WISC card in my wallet, I always, always, always put students first. And I know that we have a question coming up in that regard. But to give you some examples, I worked on a student bus pass program when I was in student government here. One of the first pieces of legislation, my first term in office, that we successfully had adopted was the city agreeing to a student bus pass program. Other examples are in the area of housing and we'll get to these in a minute, but in the areas of housing and equality for students in particular. I've been endorsed by many organizations in our community, for example, Fair Wisconsin, for my leadership in equality issues, and for example, labor unions for my work helping working people. So I really am looking forward to our conversation tonight, and again, want to thank all of you for being here and for the organizers for allowing us this opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your opening statement. Maxwell, now it is your turn.
I am Maxwell Laubenstein. I am currently a senior at UW studying biological system engineering, specializing in natural resources, land management, and environmental engineering, which is in fact an incredible mouthful. I am also, for the past many years, have been an activist, organizer, and active member of the community who has been sought and fighting to uplift the lives of and voices of people around me, and of people who have been struggling to have representation and to see the changes that they have needed for years now. My start in this type of activism largely expanded around the start of this pandemic. Before that, I was an environmentalist at heart, I still am, but I wasn't in the position really to address anything as intersectional or broader in the community than what was immediately in front of me. But when pandemic hit and I saw people living out of their cars, trying to face the decision between affording tuition and affording rent, or people who were trying to receive aid and support from the city and were failing to receive it, I listened to the voices around me. I got frustrated and I got active. I started coordinating with community members, with community leaders, organizations. I developed relationships with groups from unions like the TAA to multicultural groups like the BIPOC Coalition. And together, we worked together to uplift our voices and fight both the university and the city asking for change. And once I started to see that I didn't have to wait half my life to have an impact to uplift those around me, I couldn't stop. I started running for more official and more direct forms of action. I found positions in the Associated Students of Madison. Over the past year and a half, I was the Student Services Finance Committee chair. And this level of involvement has inspired me and allowed me to work with an even larger network encompassing broader communities of Madison, lifting the voices of the residents and the people who actually live here and who are actually struggling. So when my time in the student government was up, I wasn't done trying to fight for this community. And so I started to set my eyes on the horizon, and I started to aim to fight where I've seen so many other inspiring people fight before, and I decided to run for the seat on city council. And I want to emphasize now how critical this election in particular is. It's the first time in my lifetime, there will be multiple people on this ballot. It's the first time in my lifetime that we'll have a properly democratic election. We didn't have this opportunity in 2007. We didn't have this opportunity in 2011. But this year, in just a few months, people have the opportunity to elect based on their values, based on what they want for this community, and to hear their voices heard. See their voices heard. So I do appreciate organizations like my old home with ASM and CANA and BadgersVote coming out to host this. I really would like to see the community coming out to express their voice, to put forth the change that they are seeing. I really want to use the connections and relationships and roots I've built in this community to help raise those voices and help make those changes apparent. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements. Now we'll get into the five topical questions, starting with our first question.
All right, so the first question I have for you, for both of you, what have you done historically to serve students and young people in your district?
And we will start with you, Mike, first, and you can start.
Thank you, Lane, for the question. And as I was alluding to moments ago, I have worked on behalf of students for much of my life at this point. And I shared with you the bus pass example. Let me share some others if I might. Several years ago, we had a rash of horrific sexual assaults. Many of them actually occurred in the so-called sophomore slum neighborhood. And one thing that was a common refrain was that they were stranger sexual assaults, with intruders having made access to apartment buildings and laundry areas and basements. I thought there was a pretty easy solution to try to prevent those sexual assaults from occurring. And that was requiring that landlords take the very simple step of locking exterior doors and basement doors and common area laundry rooms. So we successfully adopted that ordinance in the wake of those tragedies occurring. And you'd be surprised, it's probably just common sense for all of you here. Of course, our front doors have locks on them. Back when this occurred many years ago, there were large numbers of apartment buildings with many, many units in them that had no exterior locks, believe it or not. So the ordinance required those exterior locks. It required buzzers, doorbells, intercom, some way that you know that there's a visitor that's waiting, trying to seek access. Another example, we had a absolutely horrific tragedy on North Bedford Street when a UW student lost his life in a house fire. His name was Peter Talon. In the wake of that, I successfully sponsored a smoke alarm ordinance that mandated, for the first time in Wisconsin history, that smoke alarms be modern, up to date, tamper resistant, 10-year. The batteries don't have to be replaced. They can't be tampered with. They have to be outside every bedroom in all living areas. Because it turned out this house on Bedford Street had several smoke alarms, but they just didn't work. None of them worked, except for one. It was horrific that this student lost his life that night. If any of you have enjoyed, as an underager, free live entertainment in our community in a licensed establishment that has an alcohol license, I was a lead sponsor of the ordinance several years ago to create an 18+ entertainment license where underagers are able to legally enter establishments anywhere in the city, but especially in the campus area that takes advantage of these licenses. So you can enjoy concerts, DJs, bands, if you're under 21 and they happen to be selling alcohol in that establishment. Before that, underagers weren't legally allowed to be on the premises. Those are just a couple of examples, because I know I got the signal, our time is limited, but I assure you that my passion for assisting students is never ending. It will continue, and it's something that I care deeply about.
Thank you for that,
Thank you.
Councilman Pike. Now I'm actually,
I'm gonna first take the opportunity to expand a little bit on my time as the Student Services Finance Committee Chair. During this time, my committee was responsible for the $35 million segregated fee budget, which we used to fight on a variety of student encouraged issues, from labor rights. We raised wages. We were able to pass an iteration of the COVID relief fund, which was able to directly provide relief to student fees on students. We were able to expand mental health resources, increasing the budget for UHS to allow for the hiring of new mental health professionals. And what I think is relevant here is that since sexual violence is still a massive and predominantly unaddressed issues in large parts of campus and downtown Madison, we were able to expand the resources allotted for the sexual violence response program within UHS. We were able to hire new advocates to directly respond to the currently overwhelmed system, which has an incredible backlog. I think it's significant number of people have to wait upwards to 4 months to hear responses on services after a sexual assault due to the prevalence of these continued violences in this area. So we're able to work with organizations like PAVE, like different domestic groups like the BIPOC Coalition, and hear from the community what areas they weren't feeling safe, what areas could be changed, and how we can start moving forward with that. The predominant area, of course, was expanding the resources available to survivors. The next step, though, is also changing the culture and environment that promotes violence in areas like downtown parties, like the dark alleys that still exist around the any opposite side of State Street, and provide resources to ensure that people were able to feel safer in these areas. And I want to emphasize that this issue is still incredibly present and ongoing. It is not something that has finished in the slightest. And that's why it's so important to, again, go back to these communities, to go back to these marginalized groups who are disproportionately affected by violence on all accounts, to hear the stories, to listen to these groups, and to find out what steps the city can be doing in coordination with the disproportionately targeted to mitigate the impact and to help prevent future violence and not just claiming that the issue is done. Thank you.
Awesome. Would you like to rebuttal at all, or you have
Well,
1 minute to that?
I certainly wanted to hasten to add that when I was sharing my experience and my track record and use the example of the lock ordinance, I in no way, shape, or form was insinuating that sexual violence is not a plague on our community in any way. So I just want to make that clear. And in fact, most recently, the city received a $1 million grant from the federal government to work on safety issues in the downtown area. And one of the main priorities of that is to deal with sexual assault violence in our community. And the money started to show fruit most recently when the Rape Crisis Center began trainings in establishments in the State Street area to allow employees to spot potential issues where sexual assault might be occurring. If I have a moment, just
10 seconds.
one more example that there are several tenant landlord ordinances I also was a lead sponsor of during my tenure in City Hall. Sadly, many of those have been wiped off the books because of the state legislature preempting the city.
So thank you all for your answers to the first question. We will now move on to the second question.
Thank you. So my question for you today is, downtown Madison continues to see a steady stream of development proposals for new housing. How can the city of Madison encourage the inclusion of more affordable housing in these development proposals? And for this one, we are going to start with Maxwell first.
The first step is going about changing how the city views affordable housing in its negotiations with developers. A large portion of the effort towards these negotiations and the development and committee steering meetings I've been a part of has been on the expansion of the quantity of units and the quantity of units labeled affordable. Whereas what this ultimately leads to is, while we do increase the number of units for an expansion of the growing city, what we don't see is an expansion of units that are actually in the price range and price allotment for the residents who actually live here. Oftentimes, the solution from these developers is, oh, find some roommates, or oh, get a grant subsidy, etc., as opposed to focusing on the reduction of cost per square foot to rent. Beyond this, the misappropriation of these affordable housing is leading to significant declines in what is actually functionally available to tenants. In current developments, like the Olive development, we're seeing the label of affordable housing being used on units that cost upwards to $800 to $900, which is well beyond what is affordable by any student in most low-income residents. The average rent in Madison is $1,500, which is completely inaccessible to the majority of the population, especially in the downtown and District 4. Beyond this, what we can be doing is we can be taking more direct action to support naturally occurring affordable housing. We can be holding tenants landlords accountable so that the affordable housing that does exist isn't allowed to exist only on the par of the quality declining until the landlord is forced to sell in units like a lot of what we call sophomore slums, which is, might I say, an atrocious name for what is such a massive housing unit on campus. And we see students having to live through decrepit housing in order to pay rent. And so by holding quality housing accountable, by holding landlords accountable to the ordinances that are often positive ordinances that are set but often aren't met by these landlords, we're actually able to see the affordable housing that exists being made accessible and of quality appropriate to the communities in Madison. As we're moving forward, we should be looking at support from expansion of, as I'm sure we said, TIF programs using to be subsidized developments. We could be using public housing and land grants to be used to subsidize further local and Madison-wide developments. And we could rely on this, we could elect a city council that's willing to support and pursue development plans that don't just expand housing, that expand housing in a way that's responsible and affordable to communities that live here, and not just the high income residents that we hope will come one day.
Awesome. Thank you for your response, Maxwell. And now, Mike, when you're ready.
Well, thank you, Eli and Sarah, for the question. I absolutely believe that we have an affordable housing crisis in our community. It's not new. It's something that is a constant frustration for me personally. Each and every conversation I have with developers proposing housing in downtown begins with the question of affordability. And it doesn't end there. It continues throughout all the conversations. Those of you in CANA know, because of the excellent work you've all done, working with developers on their proposals in the CANA boundaries, within the CANA boundaries. The reality is the city's hands are tied in so many respects because of state case law and legislative enactments at the state capitol that prevent us from requiring affordable housing. I'm all for requiring affordable housing. Don't get me wrong. I was one of the sponsors of our monumental inclusionary zoning ordinance that mandated affordability in all new development, whether it be rental or owner occupied. That was struck down by the state Supreme Court as unconstitutional, contrary to the state rent control prohibition. So what we're left with are carrot approaches because we don't have stick approaches. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the sponsors of an ordinance that was just introduced a couple nights ago at the city council meeting that will hopefully increase the amount of lower cost housing in the downtown through density bonuses by amending our zoning code in a way where it's permissive under state law by asking developers to consider increasing the number of units within their development, increasing the number of stories within their development, but not the overall height is what's limited by ordinance today. For example, the Capitol View height limit. We believe that it's a way as a, again, carrot approach to provide this bonus, density bonus idea. Maxwell mentions OLIV. OLIV is an example where I don't call it affordable housing by any means, but lower cost housing was included. How did that come to being? In the very first conversation I had with Core Spaces, the developers, I said, and they said, you know, the height limit's unrealistic here. It's only 8 stories, but the buildings around it under the blocks are taller. And I said, yes, that's true. And they said, is there any way you could see political support for rezoning the property to allow for a greater height? And I said, only if you consider lower cost units. They don't do lower cost units unless they're required by law to do that in other states. These are, you know, I don't need to tell you, of course, Spaces are nationwide student housing developers. They did that here because of our in effect, density bonus that we work together on. So over 10% of the units are considered lower cost in that development. And I really hope that we will see more of that downtown in the campus area, both student and non-student oriented housing.
Awesome. Then we'll move on to the next, since there was no mention of your name in it. But I'll allow 30 seconds just to respond to anything.
Yeah, I just want to mention that we have seen both communities and members of the city come together to end whether or not affordable units. And we've seen that in the past 2 years. The specific example I want to mention is Hub 2, in which a bunch of concerned community members who are worried about the potential growth of inaccessible luxury housing came together to argue and stop this development in favor of a future development that would include affordable housing. So to say that the conversation of how we can interact with developers has ended, I think is a little short-sighted.
Thank you, Maxwell. Awesome. So we'll move to our next question then. So how do you define economic development? How do you balance the need for density and the existing neighborhood character? So Maxwell, you'll have the chance to respond first, and then Mike will go second, okay? So when you're ready.
So economic development, for one, of course, is going to be the financial growth of the city, but it's also going to be the growth of programs and policies that support the communities within the city. And so we're looking at the future of Madison. We're not just looking at having high-income residents. We're looking at residents who have stable housing, who have financial security, and can consistently afford to buy groceries and gas when needed to. When we're talking about the growth of the density and character of the city, I fully believe that those two are not dichotomous, that we can have both. There's no need for compromise. My point is going to be that if we're favoring density to support the affordable housing initiatives, what we're going to be doing is moving towards smaller units, less quality of living, and sacrificing and looking for room for essentially the sardine of renters in Madison in exchange for the potentiality of lower rent, as opposed to specifically targeting, again, the reduction to rent per square foot of livable space. As the city is growing, there are of course historical districts that do contribute a lot to the character of Madison. And I believe that the majority of housing developments in target areas for housing are not going to primarily be in these neighborhoods. And beyond that, when it comes to development, we do have the ability to develop wisely, to develop in coordination with our communities to identify what characteristics, what values are met by those historical or precedent, so the historical precedent of the character of the area and how we can preserve that in our new developments. But we should not be sacrificing specific neighborhoods for housing, for the character when we have people living on the streets. So we do need the expansion of affordable housing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your response, Maxwell. And now, Mike, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Eli. This is an extension really of the last question in my mind, and that is not only do we have an affordable housing crisis in our community, we have a housing crisis in our community. Many communities would, I think, like to have this problem, but the reality is we are a very attractive place for people to reside. And we just don't have enough housing of all types, all varieties to fulfill the need. The demand is so great and the amount of available housing is so little, relatively speaking. It's at historically low levels. So whether it's the, now 2 years in a row of record-breaking freshman classes enrolling in UW-Madison, or it's all of the young professionals, many of them are Epic employees that are my neighbors in the Bassett neighborhood, or whether it's, not to keep mentioning extremes, but my constituents that I have the honor of representing at Capitol Lakes Retirement that I get to meet, that literally move here from all over the world, often to be closer to their families that are already here. There is just not enough housing. There are waiting lists. I don't have to tell you all the frenzy for students to rushing to find leases for a year from now. It's just insane. And so economic development certainly is about the health of our community. It's about the health of the downtown. The heart of the city isn't strong. The rest of the city is hurt by that. In terms of working with developers from day one, when I was first elected and had this privilege 28 years ago, was to demand that there be neighborhood input at the earliest stages possible to work with developers on their proposals. Those of you that are CANA activists know full well this process because you have beautifully acted on it over the last few years since CANA was created, since it was established. I have insisted that developers go through a neighborhood meeting process since the first year I was elected. That is not a requirement of our ordinances. It's not in our zoning code. It's something though that has become established where my colleagues over the years, I think almost to a person, have followed that lead and insisted on developers having meetings with not only the established neighborhood associations like CANA, but trying to extend a greater reach of directly affected stakeholders and invite them to public meetings outside of the public hearings where you're time limited and maybe intimidating in City Hall and that sort of thing. So the neighborhood character and the quality of life for all of the residents that currently live there, the future residents, whether it be in the new development or neighbors of that development, is critical. And that will never change in my book. Any new development, as much as we are in dire need of housing, period, and especially affordable housing, we need to make sure that it fits in with the character of the neighborhood and does not adversely impact the quality of life of the neighbors.
You have 1 minute remaining, so when you're ready.
So when we're talking about economic development, we're talking about growth and change. My question is, towards what and for who? What are we growing towards? What is our goal? What's our vision for Madison? I see the future of Madison being somewhere where people have housing security, where people don't have to worry about the skyrocketing price of groceries from week to week, and where people can afford to contribute to the development of local businesses and be commercial consumers of their own neighborhoods and their own Madison's own production. We're not going to be supporting local businesses. We're not going to be supporting new developments if people aren't financially secure enough to be doing so. So we're talking about economic growth and development in the city will be coming from ensuring financial stability of our residents and communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxwell. So now we'll move to our fourth question.
All right, so what is your experience in helping downtown Madison businesses and your plan to work with them moving forward?
Mike, when you're ready, you will have the first go at it.
Thank you, Lane and Eli. If I pulled out my cell phone, I could find you literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contacts for downtown small business people. It's one of the reasons why I think by the way, you don't do this for the money. Being a member of the Madison City Council, we do not make a living wage in anything close to a living wage. This is pure public service and the closest level to the people. And one of the reasons why I know I've done this as long as I have and wish to continue doing this great honor is because I have met so many amazing small business people, mom and pop businesses, many of them immigrants, new immigrants to not only our community, but our nation, that hope to open businesses in the downtown area. I, on a given day, probably have more contacts with small businesses downtown on many days than I do the residents that I represent downtown. And that's the nature of the 4th district. There are so many, it's the core downtown, just think of all of those absolutely tremendously diverse, wonderfully homegrown local businesses on State Street, the Capitol Square, and beyond. I have made it a goal of mine to help those folks to the best of my ability, whether it's with an alcohol license, with building permits, or with the most general question of what do I do with my refuse and recycling, help those people and welcome them, thank them for opening their business and investing in our downtown. I have religiously attended every Greater State Street Business Association meeting, every Downtown Business Improvement District board meeting, a group that I was one of the founders of, over my tenure in City Hall. I don't have to do that, but I do it because I think it's important. These people largely, won't be able to vote for Maxwell or I in a week and a half or in April. But it goes with what I think is a very critical role of being a member of the Madison City Council, and that is helping small business people. We talked about economic development a minute ago. They are part and parcel of the economic development of our community, and helping them foster those businesses, helping them recover from the effects of the pandemic, especially entrepreneurs of color, helping them afford the absolutely ridiculously high commercial rents downtown, especially on State Street, are all things that I hope to continue to be able to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Meg. Now when you're ready, Maxwell.
Yeah, I actually am a downtown worker. I'm an employee at CP's on State Street, brand new small business, used to be a food truck. And I've been working hand in hand with the owner, John McCoon of John McCoon's Edible Spoons, to try and navigate the city's unnecessarily complex and oftentimes demeaning licensing programs and permit programs. We have seen unnecessary delays that have been for certain licenses that can only be surpassed by out-of-pocket fees, which are inaccessible to most small business owners. And for the past few years, we've seen businesses like the one I'm currently working at pop up, struggle, and fall apart. That's why when we look at State Street, we look to what portions fall into District 4, and we see that aside from Michelangelo's and the cheese shop, our half is empty. When we look at the times when local businesses have been struggling, Like 2 years ago, when State Street was burning, the city has failed to provide grant subsidies and adequate support to ensure that small business owners were in a position to adequately recover. And so when I'm running for council, what I want to be seeing is these barriers to access, which are well within the means of the city to address, which have been developed by the city in the past few years, be brought to a point where small business owners aren't struggling on behalf of the city putting arbitrary barriers to access. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that these businesses, again, can only grow when the communities in Madison can afford to shop. With areas like coffee shops, small restaurants, areas where people are paying what would be a more paying for services that they couldn't, that are out of pocket, unnecessary, and go between the choice of rent or getting a burger down at Suki's, people are going to choose rent. So when we're looking about economic growth of and development of downtown businesses and bringing small businesses back to Madison, we're looking at making sure the community can afford to afford the level of commerce that's needed to support them. And we're looking to make sure that the city isn't actively putting barriers in the way to prevent these businesses from developing. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Well, to clarify for everyone, Suki's is not located in the 4th district. So I don't want anyone to read into Maxwell's statement that I would not help Suki's and John personally. It's not in the 4th district. John has never ever reached out to me. It's in the 2nd Aldermanic district, that fine restaurant. I did happily support Suki's both beer license several months ago, and then very recently their expansion to a full liquor license as a member of the Alcohol License Review Committee. I also want to clarify that we have literally granted tens of thousands of dollars in COVID recovery grants to downtown small
Thank you, Mike.
businesses.
That is your answer. And then you have 30 seconds since your name was mentioned.
Yeah, you're right. Suki's is not in District 4, but what it is, it's subject to many of the same restraints and regulations imposed by the city. And when we're looking at the dichotomy between District 4 and District 2 parts of State Street, the District 4 part is one which has empty businesses, lease signs all over, and only a couple historically established businesses thriving. We're looking for change. We're looking for change that supports the growth and filling of those empty lots in District 4.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next question then.
All right, what is your strategy for building political coalitions on the Common Council to support policies that will benefit District 4? For this question, we're going to start with.
All right. I'm running my campaign on the philosophy of building relationships with the communities in Madison and with the decision makers who are just as involved and able to support the changes the communities are asking for. So I've been supported by a couple of Madison alders already. I've been supported by notable community members such as Francesca Hong and groups in the area like the Working Families Party, which is why I'm confident that moving forward, I can achieve this political change. I've had to, in similar situations, address political dichotomies, political controversies, arguments, situations where achieving a positive result is difficult, if not impossible. When I've been fighting for change from the university, when I've been fighting for change from the city. The results that have been, we've achieved at the university raises in the wage. We've achieved expansion of labor rights. We've achieved expansion of mental health and sexual violence resources. When it comes to the city, as I said earlier, we stopped Hub 2. We're fighting for further change. We're fighting for a community that's a city and a council that's representative of us. And so I will work hard to develop positive relationships, but I'm going to be fighting with the community. And I'm hoping that the alders who are elected this cycle will be doing the same. And that's where our relationships will come from. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, Maxwell. Mike, when you're ready.
Thank you very much for the question again. I have a proven track record of almost 3 decades now of getting things done in City Hall. I've had the privilege of working with many mayors, many city council colleagues, of all stripes, of all backgrounds, representing all geographic parts of our community. And I've been able to get things done to the benefit of the downtown and its people. So I happily could cite other examples. The reality is that I would not have been elected president of the city council for as many terms as I did if I didn't have great relations with my colleagues throughout the years. I would not have been able to provide the amount of financial resources for downtown projects as a member of the city's finance committee if I wasn't able to build coalitions and get the necessary votes. I've been a member of the city's finance committee every day that I've been in office. And through my work on the finance committee, I've been able to provide funding for things that are as monumental as the Central Library renovation. We will be breaking ground within the next couple months on a brand new downtown park behind the senior center, adjacent to Capitol Center Market. That was a multi-year effort. Having budget amendments passed and seeing it to fruition of ground being broken takes many years. I'm committed to this and I want to see these projects through. So that little courtyard there next to Capitol Center Market that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to most of you, especially those that live in the neighborhood, probably think it's private property, that it belongs to the Capitol Center apartments there. It does not, it's public property. And we will be rehabbing that entire space, every square foot of it, and making it a welcoming environment for all and making it clear that it is an official City of Madison park. I worked hard to get the funding for Lisa Link Peace Park that was in the 4th district. By the way, speaking of districts, let me just say the reason why one end of State Street, I can't resist this, why one end of State Street seems more healthy than the other end is simply because of the pandemic. Think of the power of the tens of thousands of students, like so many of you here tonight, on this end of State Street, the campus end, and then look at the other end of State Street, where all of the public employees, whether you're city, county, or state employees, largely have the luxury of working remotely. Most of the private sector employees around the Capitol Square still work remotely. In the city of Madison, for example, our employees are only required to work in the office 2 days a week. Some state agencies don't have to go to work ever in the office. Some state office buildings are ghost towns, are completely empty. That's why we see tragically not as much vibrancy, not as many places to get a bite to eat at lunchtime on one end of State Street versus the other. Enough said. I think I have such a proven track record of being able to build
Thank you, Mike.
coalitions in City Hall that
We appreciate your answer. And you have 1 minute left, Maxwell. If you'd like to go.
All right, I'm just gonna reiterate a little bit that again, I have had to build coalitions in a variety of circumstances, varieties of groups. I am running this campaign, building relationships with people from Art Paul to Francesca Hong and every corner of Madison I can reach. I'm hoping that moving into this, we can develop a council that is adherent to and representative of the broader communities of Madison. And what we have seen is the council struggling in the past 4 years and past decades over situations like Unity and the Judge Doyle Square incident. We almost ended up with a $40 million lawsuit due to the council's inability to coalesce on a direction forward. And so the ability to build these relationships, build
Thank you
continue
for
to be
your
critical.
answer, Maxwell. So now we will be moving into the audience questions portion of this. So you all on Zoom, you all in the room, I know that your minds have been going in circles and you guys have probably been thinking about stuff. So either raise your hand and we can start that if you do not want to ask in person or over Zoom or the question thing. You can also scan this QR code up here of your phone and fill out the Google form to answer that question too. So with that, we will look to the Zoom and we'll look to the room for any hands to be raised. Here, let me give you the microphone. If that's okay.
Stood up with back up and fall.
No worries.
I will say as a preface for this, that I am a friend of Max's, I work with him on the assistant. Yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, I think my question is outwardly neutral. Alderman Beer said that building coalitions takes time and making change takes time. The park took a long time to do, and same with the Monona Terrace redevelopment. I guess my question then is, what is for each alderman, what is your goal, long-term goal? Because obviously you guys start working on it now. What's your vision, and how do you plan to kind of enact and further that?
Great question. Then going about that, we will start with Mike first, and then in the same back and forth. So when you're ready.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you for the follow-up question. I appreciate that. Yes, I think you very correctly stated my earlier response that to affect real meaningful change and progress, it often does take a lot of time. And this position isn't for one that might be impatient as much as I would love to get stuff done yesterday. It just takes time. It's the reality of the situation. But again, I have engaged tirelessly in my efforts over the years to get things done for the people and interests of downtown Madison. In the future, again, this is a 2-year term. Again, for those that aren't familiar, every 2 years I have to do a gut check and decide, am I going to put myself out there and seek re-election or not? Every biennium. And I literally have this question with myself and others around me, and it gets serious. Yeah. And the reason why I respond in the affirmative each and every time is because, as I said in my opening statement, I have unfinished business to accomplish. I believe that there is a progressive vision for this community that I want to see fulfilled. I have a dream that, thanks to another very, very important question on all your ballots this month and in April, we will actually see a pro-democracy majority on the Wisconsin Supreme Court that they can lead to change at the state capitol, ultimately in terms of redistricting, that then will allow us to be freed, working at the municipal level, to engaging in much more progressive policies than our hands are currently tied. I could recite for you chapter and verse all of the ordinances that I was a primary sponsor of, especially tenant rights legislation that has been wiped off the books when the last gubernatorial administration was on office with the work of the state legislature. So the opportunities are absolutely limitless, actually. So it actually wouldn't take a lot of time, because there are so many ordinances that we have on the books that we simply cannot enforce or do anything with. Because of the realities at the other end of State Street from where we sit tonight. And that's something that I really am looking forward to and hopeful about that progress moving forward.
Thank you for your response, Mike. Now, when you're ready, Maxwell.
Yeah, I'd love to see freedom from the state for the city to be able to negotiate and act on relevant policies and have proper negotiating grounds when it comes to development and new city services. But more specifically, what I'm seeing for the city is a little more general. I want to see a city where people aren't being displaced for new luxury housing, where people who are in affordable housing don't have their roofs caving in. I want to see a city where people can go to a grocery store and be able to reasonably afford bread. I want people to be able to go down all of State Street and see a variety of thriving businesses. The route to that, of course, is going to be, again, interacting directly with the residents who are here, seeing what means are needed to be able to support and what the city has not done in the past 30 years to be able to facilitate that reality, to see what hasn't been done in the past 28 years of office to make sure that people can afford to actually shop downtown. And what that's going to come from is coming from responsible negotiation tactics with developers. It's going to come from a reorganizing and honestly rewriting of a lot of city ordinances on small business development and new business development. And it's going to come from ensuring that city programs like the Madison Forward Fund and city public services continue to be supported and are expanded upon to ensure financial and mobile security in Madison. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for your response. And you have 30 seconds if you'd like to respond to anything.
Well, I will happily take every second you give me, Eli, if
30
you figured
seconds.
that out. So I just want to share that I concur in the vision of a progressive Madison, and especially one where housing is a right, not a privilege. I wish this wasn't true, but even simple task of building inspection is something that the legislature and previous governor has tied our hands with. We used to have a very vibrant, systematic building inspection where any tenant in the city could anonymously
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your
anyway,
response.
file a complaint because there would
Yes,
be
yes.
programmed inspections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Now we will move to the next question from the audience. Do you have any in the Zoom chat?
Yeah, we do have some.
Okay, let's go to the Zoom chat then.
Yeah, so this one is from an audience member participating Zoom. And their question is, how do you feel your unique perspectives and skill sets would benefit District 4? And for this one, we will start with Maxwell first.
All right. I'm a young activist who has been directly in touch with communities fighting for change for the past 4 years. I'm an environmentalist. I'm studying biological systems engineering again. I have a great perspective on how we can promote sustainable development in Madison and responsibly support the broad ecology within Madison and try and fight the kind of citywide pollutants like PFAS and lake contaminations. I have a track record of fighting alongside students and organizations in Madison who know my name and know that I am a voice that's willing to fight alongside them, that's willing to raise other voices and willing to make sure that the priorities of the actual residents of Madison, the actual 70% of District 4, the actual majority of normal people are met. And as somebody who is just finishing up my degree, I'm of course looking to be able to continue producing, continue using my growing background, my growing perspective to support the communities around me. That's my goal. That's simple as that. And I appreciate y'all doing this. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maxwell. Mike, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Eli, and thank you, Sarah, for the question. So I have to confess to all of you, it's hard for me to talk about myself. I don't like talking about myself. I don't like coming across as bragging, but you know, this that's why we're here, I guess. So it goes without saying that I think I know how to get things done. And I've been doing it, as I say, for, you know, admittedly longer than, you know, many of you have been on this good earth that are in this room tonight. And I believe to my core that my mission has always been to help everybody downtown. I don't want anyone to have the impression that I only help one segment of the community. I don't care about this segment of the community or that segment of the community. It's everybody. It's all the people downtown. After doing this as long as I have, I believe I know the downtown. Yes, it's a transient place. Yes, people come and go. I can't tell you how many people. I feel really old every time they say it, and it happens almost every week. You were my older when I was a student, and the person, you know, is you know, my age. So anyway, I have the experience, I have the track record. I obviously know how to get things done. I can obviously hit the ground running. This experience takes time. There is a steep learning curve. I know because I actively participate in the orientation every 2 years for my new council colleagues. With me, you don't have to worry about any of that. You have the experience that in the track record, And I believe the same values that the vast majority of downtown residents concur with. There are a lot of things that again, I believe we can get done and will get done moving forward. We are still recovering from the pandemic downtown. I wasn't able to finish my last response, so if I could quickly mention, we believe we've done a workaround where we can now have so-called programmed inspections where a building inspector is in every apartment in Madison, at least every decade. We used to have that when it used to be 7 years until the state law changed. We believe we figured out a workaround. We're starting in the Allied neighborhood this year with that. The next neighborhood is the Mifflin neighborhood after that. So it will relieve the burden of renters feeling that they will be retaliated against by their landlord if they complain about a defect in their apartment, because the building inspectors would have told the landlord, we're seeking entry. We need to see every square inch of this apartment. That's something that I'm looking forward to. It's something that I've been trying to work on mightily since the state law gutted our programmed inspection program. So there's a lot to that that I really am looking forward to seeing in the future.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
And you have 1 minute max left in your time.
Okay. Again, I want to see us moving into a position where we are not held a hairpin by lack of change, despite policies passing for decades of history. I want to see the progressive ordinances that have been proposed by current and past alders have a reasonable chance of moving forward and supporting progressive policies. I want to see that historical precedent is not the only aspect of how we can move forward. The perspective that is relevant to and in context with the communities that live in Madison and live in these areas is adherent to. I want to see a city that supports all populations and is going to commit to that, not just in words, but in policy and practice. And I'm sorry, I don't think we've seen that done.
All right, thank you, Maxwell. Now, let's go. You have a question in the back? You up first and then we'll go.
Do you have any specific thoughts about the bus system, things you would change, or if you're satisfied with how it's operating right now?
Awesome. We'll start with that question and then we'll go back to you. All right. So now we have Mike starting. When you're ready.
Thank you. That's a really excellent question. So I think probably many of you are aware, but if not, let me just share that we have major changes occurring with our Metro transit system. I mentioned that I have a long history of fighting for especially student access and campus access to our public transit system, going back to when I was in student government myself and the creation of the student bus pass. With that said, in literally a matter of months, almost every route in Madison will change to some degree or another. We have a so-called transit network redesign that will be implemented on Sunday, June 11th. We purposely waited till after both the UW semester, the Madison Metropolitan School District semesters all ended and so forth, to have this monumental change. I believe, and it did receive unanimous approval both at the city's Transportation Commission and the City Council, that it will provide a much more equitable level of service, especially for those transit dependent riders, of which we obviously have very many in our community. And that's critical. It's always been a huge priority. Ever since I've been on the council, we have devoted millions of dollars in property tax levy money to support our mass transit system, because the federal and state subsidies don't come close to the level of service that we believe our community deserves. Just as I said earlier, I believe housing is a right. I believe public transportation is a right as well. So I am looking forward to those issues. I have to say, for the 80 routes, it doesn't change the 80 routes. That is completely controlled by UW Transportation Services. So overcrowding on the 80 routes and whatever, I'm afraid, you won't see much relief there. And that's more of a seg fee issue and UWTS issue. in terms of the 80s, even though, yes, they're Metro rolling stock and operators using those buses. And then the next big change is bus rapid transit. BRT is coming in the fall of 2024. High-speed express buses, first running east to west, generally East Wash, Mineral Point, obviously downtown in the middle. As I look out toward where the route will be on University Avenue, close adjacent to campus, and Johnson Street, respectively. And then let me just also add the excitement that I think we're the closest we've ever come to having passenger rail come to our community in a very long time, since passenger rail ended here many decades ago, over 50 years ago. We really think we have a great chance of having an Amtrak station built somewhere in Madison in the next few years and operating, connecting us to other cities in the Midwest. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in many respects.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Now, Maxwell, when you're ready.
All right, the expansion of transit systems is great, and I'm glad for the most part on the current plan. I'm glad to see that BRT will be connecting East and West and Central Madison really well. What we haven't been seeing is there's still a lot of neighborhoods that aren't efficiently connected, either major neighborhoods to either commerce centers, like big business centers, either downtown or otherwise, or to other critical and dense neighborhoods. For instance, in District 4, we don't see a direct connection between the Midland area and Greenbush without going all the way up to State Street or farther. I'd also like to take a moment to emphasize that as the farther you go to the region edges of Madison, of course, there's going to be a spiderwebbing of lack of access to transit routes. City is growing quickly. If we're talking about growing density, we need to be talking about ensuring that all areas of Madison have reasonable access to public transit. We're talking in downtown in particular, we shouldn't only be looking at the metro system, which does cover a decent amount in downtown. We should also be looking at other means of safe, environmentally friendly transit. We should be looking at our bike routes, what's safe and effective, where isn't that being met. Areas like, again, Regent Street is very uncomfortable for most bikers. People refuse to bike past Park Street, give or take. And if you're going down Park Street itself, people won't really go past Midway. And if we're going to be considering ourselves a multi-transit method friendly city, we also have to supporting multiple methods of transit and making sure that these means are just as accessible. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, then we'll move to the next question.
I do have a question for the Zoom.
We did.
We want to take that one first.
We'll take the Zoom question and then we go to you, bouncing back and forth.
Okay, so our next question we have from Zoom is, how do you think you would go about solving a conflict in a disagreement between two different council members?
And Maxwell, you will be the first to respond to this.
I think my theme of tonight has been that the conflict will be resolved by which of the opposing viewpoints is more representative of the Madison community at large, which is more adherent to the community supposed to be representative of, and which alderperson is actually acting representative of their community. If it is a case that two different regions of Madison have such varied dichotomatic perspectives on a particular issue, it's going to come down to what better serves a larger community of Madison. We want to be in a position where the city is doing as much as it can to ensure the stable quality of life for as many residents as possible. From issue to issue, what that solution looks like will probably have large variations. But again, it's going to come down to what do the residents actually want and how can we achieve that? Thanks.
Thank you, Maxwell. When you're ready, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks to whoever out there and virtually asked us the question. It actually is a real life issue on the city council, and it's not just in the past, it's current. Relations amongst council colleagues right now is not the greatest. This isn't a newsflash for observers of the city council. It's unfortunate. I think a lot of it has to do with the pandemic and the fact that for some of us, we didn't even meet personally all of our colleagues during the height of the pandemic, before vaccines were widely available. And we literally were just screens, pictures on a Zoom screen in our meetings and so forth, including like the orientations that I participated in and helped lead. So it's a real issue. There are sadly cliques, factions, perhaps like anywhere in this world, amongst the 20 members of the Madison Common Council, and that's a reality today. I have always tried to get along with everybody. I try not to offend people, yet still keep to my progressive values and fight for what I think is right. And do, again, what's best for the people and interests of downtown Madison. But the reality is that there are these different factions, and sadly, I think some people tend to vote based on who's sponsoring the legislation. I think that sadly, unkind words are said. And it's really unfortunate. I try to be as humane and gentle and kind as possible with all of my colleagues. I like to think that I get along with everybody, treat them with tremendous respect, and treat them as equals. Yes, I've long been the so-called dean of the council and seniority, and been the longest serving member for a long time now. But that doesn't grant me any privilege like I know it all, or that I'm superior or what have you. We have a longstanding tradition of trying to give as many members of the city council the opportunity to be in leadership roles. So over the years of my service, I've taken turns being common council president and vice president, not to try to hold on to power, but let others experience that leadership quality. So, I consider myself a member of the Progressive Caucus. I am a member of the Progressive Caucus. We meet regularly. And yet I talk regularly with the more moderate colleagues of mine. So I get along, I think, very well, and have been able to get things done and accomplished with folks from all varieties of again, walks of life, and certainly including political ideologies.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you have 1 minute if you'd like to use it.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this opportunity to just talk about just my history of trying to handle these kind of more political dichotomies and situations. Every time I go to a council meeting and I look around and seeing all the people just scrolling on Facebook and not really hearing the issues at hand, it just really disheartens me. And I do believe that to an extent, a good extent, the alderperson is not only always representative of the community that they are elected to be adherent to. And if they're not willing to fully hear out issues and not willing to fully meet the needs of their communities, I do believe that we should be supporting those communities as well. And whether that comes from lack of opponents on a ballot, or whether it comes from just consistent elections, it's important that people in Madison have adequate representation. So that's where I would draw the line.
Cool. Thank you all. Then we'll move to our question over here. Please, yes, sir. Okay. Do you have any more questions in the Zoom?
No.
Okay. We probably want to get our last question.
Additional questions?
Yeah.
We can make this quick. My name is Tom Seeger. I think I'm representing the only senior citizen. Happy to do so. That's what makes this Alder district, this city, so excited to live in its diversity. My question to you, or first comment, is I've been watching the Lake Monona project. It's extremely exciting in terms of articulating a vision for the lakeshore in downtown Madison. I think we can all agree that State Street is a little bit frayed, and you talked about the necessity of development of State Street and articulating a better future. My question to you both is, what is your vision for State Street in the future? And how can we develop the excitement around maybe in a 20-year plan for this incredible treasure of our city in the same way that we are doing it? So I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on that. And just one more comment. Mike, thanks for your long-term service in the city. Maxwell, you're a young and passionate voice. So irrespective of what happens in this election, thank you both for your willingness to step forward and to be public service for this. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Mike, you'll be the first one to answer this one.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words, Tom. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you tonight. It's been a long time since I've seen you. Thanks for all you've done, your career on campus and off. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about State Street. State Street is the heart of our community. It is by far, I've always said, the most famous street in the state of Wisconsin, connecting our flagship university with our state capital. I have been involved in the different visions and makeovers of State Street again during my entire tenure. The 4th District throughout every decade of redistricting has always included some of State Street. At one point, it was 2 blocks, then it was 5.5 blocks. Now it's down, as you have been counting tonight, 3 blocks. Upper State Street is what's in the 4th District now tonight. But I actually was in not 1, but 2 conversations just today about the future of State Street in terms of when is the right time to begin our next planning initiative for the future of State Street and our vision of State Street. It also, this great question also allows me the opportunity to expand on the network transit redesign. One of the changes that goes with the Metro Transit Net redesign on June 11th is the fact that there no longer will be regular Metro Transit service on Lower State Street. So in only a few short months, there no longer will be buses rolling down the 400, 500, and 600 blocks every several minutes. That gives us a great opportunity to create more of a pedestrian and bicycle mall promenade, if you will, on Lower State Street. Maybe it'll be so embraced if we do it right in the future. Maybe we'll even figure out a better route for bus rapid transit, which will be occupying Upper State Street come next year, and local bus service prior to that, prior to the arrival of BRT. There are a lot of folks that have visions of more of a pedestrian oriented mall or promenade, much more lavish green space, landscaping, public art opportunities for al fresco dining and that sort of thing. A lot of folks compare us to places like Pearl Street in Boulder. Shout out to my sister, she's watching, who resides in Boulder. So just had to get that in for Elena. Anyway, it's something that is very serious. And I know a lot of people probably aren't excited about OLIV and the latest core campus, hub or James coming in. But the reality is it provides so much, goes to the economic development question tonight, so much tax increment that we are able to capture and keep in the State Street area. We will have this really powerhouse financial tool that has made over State Street over the years when we reconstructed State Street, when we recreated Library Mall. Not that long ago, I've been on all these design teams and planning teams over the years. That all the new development in the greater State Street area gives us actual revenue in the not too distant future to have the monies to actually engage in construction of the State Street Mall area.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Maxwell, when you're ready.
As it was pretty well said, I do agree that State Street is largely the heart of the city. And that's why it's so disheartening to see not only so many empty business fronts, but also just so many business fronts that are turning so heavily to just commercial franchises, and have been pushing out the opportunities for small business owners to set up brick and mortar and start providing a unique and local experience to people who come and see what we hope to be the heart of Madison. And so as we're moving forward, we're talking about once you look at a plan, we regardless of whether people have sat down to decide a new vision for State Street, a vision of State Street is being enforced. We're seeing that in the addition of the large luxury developments. We're seeing that in the addition of new commercial and franchises up and down State Street. And we're seeing that in the loss of our local and precious businesses, largely due to the obstacles presented by city fees and city ordinances at hand. So my vision for this, the heart of State Street, is something that's reflective of the character of the community, something that supports the opportunities for small business owners to set up something more than a pop-up shop, and something that is accessible to the broad residents of Madison to purview. And unfortunately, it does mean that we're going to have buses on or around State Street, but that's not the only source of disruptive traffic. What we're seeing is with these influx of commercial spaces. We're seeing trucks and deliveries and large space occupying vehicles, which are our primary sector. I live on State Street. I walk up and down it 2-3 times a day. And it's such on some days it's a beautiful sight, seeing the light through the trees and the Capitol in the distance. And other days, all I can get past is big beeping delivery truck, which is blocking 2/3 the road, and watching a bus try to get around it while students and unhoused are crammed to the corners. Bringing back and revitalizing State Street comes through supporting the residents, supporting the development of small businesses, and supporting Madisonites' access to it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for your response, Maxwell. So, do we have any other questions? Back here? All right, we definitely have time for another one. Make this our last question, and then we'll move to closing statements.
Hi, I'm Tanner. So thank you both for being here, whether it's a long time member or fresh perspective here. But I know a prior question asked about students, but this debate is about the future, not the past. So as a student, or sorry, the district's not for students, but as a student, I'm curious of what ideas you have for students in the future.
Great question. And this one, we will go to Maxwell as our first respondent, and Mike as our second.
I've spent the past 1.5 fighting the university on a number of policies and ordinances. I think the one most critical to the city and the growth of the city is the university's continued overabundance of students on campus, just led to surface of the housing situation in and around, which has just been a further the burden on the city to respond. My goal for students is the development primarily for immediate and local affordable housing that's relevant and close to campus. Areas like hoping to see the sophomore slums stop being sophomore slums and maybe sophomore affordable housing or some kitschier name than that. And seeing access across campus to city services like our great libraries, like the downtown area, like not only State Street, but the beautiful and bustling businesses we have on the east side. Part of being a student in Madison, and as somebody who is a current and finishing up student here, is that while I have gotten a lot from the culture and character of the city, I have also felt like I've been prevented from enjoying so much more the city has to offer. I haven't been able to make it more than a couple miles past consistently without having to go through extreme bus routes or extreme other modes of transportation to actually explore east side, see the interesting, unique businesses on Willie Street, to engage with the west side businesses or our opportunities out there to engage with the broader city culture. It's gotten to the point where the campus almost exists in its own bubble. And if we're going to see the campus contributing and responding to the character of the city, we need to pop that bubble and make sure the accessibility is available on both sides. Thanks.
Thank you, Maxwell. Mike, when you're ready.
Thank you for the question, Tanner. It's a good one. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the future and not repeat all of the past accomplishments that literally were motivated by my student constituents. But the reality is that I wanted to illustrate those accomplishments to give you those as an example of what I pledge to continue to do. So, for example, when I meet with, and activists from the campus area neighborhood association do as well, alcohol license applicants, I always ask them, will you be offering live entertainment? If they say affirmatively or they're thinking about it, I encourage it and I say, well, will you, and I try to sell them. And I say, will you please apply for an 18+ entertainment license to provide more opportunities for students to enjoy live music. As it relates to, I want to actually say one thing about sophomore slums. The sophomore slums have never been in the 4th district, but the word, I know I'm old, so I speak of some authority. When the sophomore slums were created as a vision of the downtown planning effort, a city planning effort, they were immediately called, Nick given the moniker sophomore slums, not because of what their condition of the housing quality, but because it was all students leaving the res halls that were all flooding to this area that was created as an undergrad area. So when it was created in the 1980s, it was immediately called sophomore slums as brand new, mint condition housing. So I just wanted to, and I started it by saying sophomore slums. I just wanted to get that clear on the record, that I don't want people here tonight to think that it's called that because it's some sort of slum-like housing quality in terms of the conditions of the housing. But anyway, as it relates to housing, I want to do everything I can to alleviate this shortage of student housing, and do so in a manner that is helpful to the vast majority of students. And that, again, and going back to earlier themes tonight, but is the reality of the lack of low cost and affordable housing for students. I talked about bus passes. I have a dream that we would have free fare buses. You wouldn't have to use your student segregated fees to pay for an ASM student bus pass. You wouldn't need your student bus passes anymore. There are things that I really I'm forward thinking to that I think are progressive, that would help students in particular, yes, but help the wider community as well. And top of the list absolutely is all things housing. I can't tell you how many contacts I received from students and their parents, more than ever in the 28 years I've been at this, freaked out about where are we going to live a year from now. It just is crazy. And I've talked to the chancellor about this and talked to the university administration. They've said that they're going to make sure that there won't be record-breaking freshman class again.
So now
But we need more
Thank you.
housing.
Now we'll be moving to closing statements. So for this, Mike, you actually be starting. So you'll have 5 minutes to speak on just your vision, etc. And then Maxwell, you'll go next. And then we'll conclude this wonderful event. I just want to again thank everyone on Zoom, thank everyone in the room. Thank you for your great questions. Thank you for attending and caring about this election. It's been really great to see the turnout and the energy. It's really great to have you all here. So with that, we'll move into our closing statements. Mike, when you're ready.
Well, thank you again, Eli. And I want to again begin with gratitude and tell you how meaningful this opportunity is tonight to share my thoughts with all of you. I also just have to say it, I can't help it, but how proud I am of CANA. For those that don't know, there was no such thing as a campus area neighborhood association only a few years ago. And thanks to student activists like Cleo and Eli, Amal, who might be watching from New York, hi Amal, and others, we finally have a real amazing voice at the city hall level for students. As much as ASM has tried and different leg affairs committees have tried, nothing beats having a bona fide recognized neighborhood association representing so much of the greater student community. And it's something I've been missing for so long. And I just can't say enough good stuff about CANA. So thank you, CANA. Thank you, BadgersVote. Thank you, ASM, for again giving us the opportunity tonight. I really sincerely want to ask each and every one of you for your vote, both in the matter of days or early voting, as early as tomorrow, and then of course in April. I have given much of my life to this job. It's a job. Indeed, it is a job. It's a full-time job, and one that is just so richly rewarding. I can't overstate that. Municipal government is the level of government closest to the people. You can get things done within a matter of hours and solve somebody's problem. You get a email or call in the morning and you could have the concern by a neighbor addressed within a matter of hours if it's a matter of some basic city service. It is just so rewarding. That's why I've been doing this. Again, you don't do it to make a living financially. It pays $14,000 a year for those that aren't aware. So that's not why any of us sign up for this. It is true blue public service. It is something that has been so meaningful to me and fulfilled so much of my life. I really hope that I have the opportunity to continue doing it for another 2 years. And I hope I have that honor and privilege to do that. It's something that I am proud of my record. I mentioned earlier, it's a little awkward for me to talk about myself. In part because I'm rusty at campaigning. I haven't had to do it in a very long time. But I am very proud of my record. As I was, compiling a list of literally the thousands, looking back at the legislative records, I have sponsored thousands of pieces of legislation over my time in the city council. And almost all of them have been successful. Yes, indeed, many of them have been wiped off the books by folks that we don't have, sadly, direct control over because of the state of democracy in Wisconsin, thanks to the other end of State Street and the people in state government. But it's something that I'm very proud of. And as I walk around the downtown, I cannot walk a single block without remarking on something that I've made a difference in people's lives. Yes, a lot of those folks have long ago moved on to live elsewhere in our community, elsewhere in the state, nation, and world. But I know I've made a difference. There were no pedestrian lights downtown when I was first elected, none. Little acorn lights, they're not the area lights that were meant to protect motorists. There were no pedestrian lights. I have insisted since the first day in office that we include pedestrian lights in all street projects. Almost every block of the 4th district, in fact, I believe I can say every block of the 4th district has pedestrian lights, or will soon, with construction projects that are scheduled over the next 2 years. We are embarking on a major improvement for pedestrians and bicyclists in the Broome-Wilson Street corridor with a project that's many years in the making, creating a cycle track for bicyclists and connecting Law Park and Lake Monona with much of the Bassett neighborhood through a cycle track and expanded sidewalks for pedestrians. That will include pedestrian lights, that will include undergrounding ugly overhead utility wires. It will include improving all of the utilities, for example, that are subterranean, like no more water main breaks. And that's something that it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but believe it or not, it's what gets me up in the morning and I love working on. It really is. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, really want to extend my thanks for this privilege, all the years I've been doing this. And
Thank you, Mike.
Ask for your support one more time.
Thank you for your closing statement, Mike. Maxwell, when you are ready.
I'm an activist, I'm an organizer. I'm somebody who is not here to be a career politician. I'm somebody who's here to do everything I can for as long as I can to help the communities of Madison and who have been crying for change for years now. And I think it's critical to kind of look at that as a perspective of the alders elected to be representative of the community, but adherent to Madison as a whole, to be working constantly to develop what is going to be most supportive of and most adherent to the residents themselves, and to make resources and services as accessible as possible. And so in some cases, that might mean taking large development plans in order to get a TIF later on, but doesn't matter when we're in a situation where libraries are considering which location to close, when buses are cutting, when the 80 line is cutting buses, reducing accessibility for students because of the Metro Transit reducing its contracted amount, not the university. When it comes down to the reduction of access we have seen year after year, decade after decade. If we want a city that is representative of the people who live here, if we want this district to be adherent to the people who are here, who've been asking for change, we need to elect somebody who is involved in that community, works day in and day out to support people through volunteering, through activism, through networking with the varieties of groups in Madison, who's willing to say that they can have a personal connection to where people are asking for change. I believe that I have shown that I have not only a passion towards building those networks, but a commitment to being the positive change that people are asking for and that people haven't seen. If you want to continue to be involved in selection. If you want to go farther and support the campaign, you can find out more about my stuff at maxwellformadison.com. That's maxwellformadison.com. Got to drop the socials out there somewhere. And please go vote. This is an election that's going to be so critical to seeing who votes. It's been 28 years since there's an opponent on the ballot. There's almost no historical voting data to say what this community is actually representative of. And we need people out there to vote to prove it. Prove what the values of this community are. Prove what you want the vision for Madison, for downtown, and for District 4 to be. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your statement, Maxwell. So before I go, Lane has some words.
Yes, before we go, I just want to take a moment to remind everybody that early voting is already happening. It's going to be running all next week. You're good to vote at any polling location. We have one at Union South, one at Memorial Union, and then coming up, and at Central Library too. And then coming up, just so I can get my dates right, on the 21st is actual election day. If you don't have a chance to go to early voting for the primary. Also, if you're interested in seeing more alder debates like this, we have another event coming up on Monday. That will be our District 2. I cannot keep them straight. Thank you guys all for coming and have a great rest of your night. Safe travel home.
Thank you, everybody on Zoom.
Bye, everybody on Zoom.
Thank you.
I know, I always was leaning into the laptop. Bye, Zoom, keep going.